Hello there, welcome back. Welcome back to the Technology Innovation Hub. It's going to be a session from DevOps portal. Let me share the screen. So we're going to start the KOPS cluster creation, Kubernetes cluster operations, right? Using that is what KOPS stand for, right? So if you take a look at our channel in the DevOps portal, right? The DevOps portal in the channel, right? And remember we created the cluster manually, right? So manually creating a cluster, we did that. But this is actually manual means it's totally manual. Right? You may remember we created all the nodes and everything was the privileges and setup and panel, the Calico network and those things. Right? We did everything manually and we initialize the cluster and then we add the nodes manually with kubectl join command. You may remember, so everything was manual. But that's for learning purpose. We did to understand most of the operations within the cluster, right? Even before building the cluster, right? How the master node comes up and what is the master node and how the worker nodes are getting joined to the cluster, like that, to understand these things. All right, so and now what we are trying to do, yeah, we are going to use a tool, right? So yeah, this is the rest of the portals in the channel, right? So microservices, Oracle, and yes, the cloud portal and those things, yes. Right, so now what we are trying to do, we are trying to use a tool, right? That is KOPS, right? KOPS stand for Kubernetes operations, right? Now with KOPS, you can create a cluster which is production equal, right? KOPS is managing a lot of things, but it is automating a lot of things, right? So let's take a look at it and we will create a cluster on AWS using KOPS, right? Because KOPS officially supports AWS, right? So it supports other vendors as well. And you can use KOPS to create a Kubernetes cluster on cloud, right? So actually before starting that, so if you just take a look at this, I can see I have done a very basic explanation here. I'll be uploading this document for the GitHub. So deploying a production ready cluster. So that is our next objective actually, right? So we have been doing a lot of practicals with Minikube and all, and we manually created the learning-based cluster. Now let's try to create a production level cluster with KOPS, right? And we have a lot of cloud vendors, which they provide managed clusters, right? So with them also there are tools. Now there are tools to create the cluster. Now that's what KOPS is one of them. And again, with Google, they have a command line tool called, this is other than their console and capital methods, right? They have command line method called gcloud container with Google. And we know with AWS, they have EKCTL, create cluster command line, right? And with Azure, we have AKS create. AZ is their command line and AKS create. And again, with Oracle, we have OCE, container engine, right? CE, right? Container engine cluster create. So likewise, different vendors now, Google, AWS, they have their own methodologies, right? Their own tools to create the cluster manually. Production equal cluster, we can do it manual creation. This is other than the console method, right? As I just mentioned, even in Azure, Oracle, AWS, you can click and create, but these are command line tools. Because KOPS also is command line we are doing now, so that's why I just want to give you the comparison. So they manage cloud vendors, right? They have their own tools, but KOPS is another open source third-party tool which supports Kubernetes cluster creation on cloud. Mainly they support on AWS, but we have this Google and all the beta versions are there for them, right? So let's visit their site actually, right? And this is another one, KubeSpray, right? KubeSpray is another tool where you can use to again to create a cluster, right? So if you take a look at their site, this KubeSpray, right? KubeSpray.io, deploy production ready Kubernetes cluster, right? Just take a look at it, right? can be deployed in AWS, GCP, Azure, OpenStack. You can see they support lot of vendors as well, right? If you have questions, check KOPS page. So KOPS is another tool, right? So let's take a look at this one later, right? And here in this practical, we are going to take a look at KOPS, right? KOPS. So if you go to KOPS official site, right? So here, right? kops.k.io, right? 6. Okay, so let's visit there, right? KOPS. So this is what they are telling. You can see easiest way to get production grade Kubernetes cluster up and running. Right? What is KOPS? Kubernetes operations, right? So you can see we like to think of it as kubectl for clusters, right? Kubectl will be KOPS is making the things very easy for you. KOPS will not only help you create, destroy, upgrade, and maintain production grade high available Kubernetes cluster, but it also provisions the necessary cloud infrastructure. Because you automate this, you will see when you create the Kubernetes cluster using KOPS on AWS, the infrastructure is automating automatically. We don't need to use a tool like Terraform and Node to automate this because it creates you the nodes, right? It creates you the security groups, right? It creates you the NAT and internet gateways, whatever necessary requirement for the cluster to up and running at the production level, it creates you. So that's why it automates the infrastructure, right? So this is what they are telling. AWS is currently officially supported with DigitalOcean, GC, and OpenStack in beta. OpenStack, right? Cloud providers. They have beta and Azure and yes, Alibaba Cloud in alpha. Okay, so we have the versions, but officially supported on AWS, right? Okay, yes, so can I see it in action? Yes, we are going to do it in action. Right? No need to check this one. We will do it step by step. Right, so let's take a look at further the document, KOPS Kubernetes cluster operations. Right, so this automates the cluster with production standards. That is what I just same thing explained in the documentation in the official site. Automatic node provisioning, a security group, NAT, VPCs, iterate gateways, subnet. Yes, it works with Route 53 for domain hosting, right? So we need the domain name and the host, right? So and hosted songs, right? And is yes, auto scaling and high availability, yeah, because for example, once it's provisioned these nodes, even if you try to terminate the node, it is not allowed. It will restart automatically, right? So it makes sure the cluster is high available for us, and auto scaling also it does, right? So let's take a look at those in action once we create the cluster, right? So prerequisites. So we are going to create it on AWS, right? So we have some prerequisites, right? What are prerequisites? We need something called admin instance or a management instance. It's just a name, right? This is just a easy to, right, pre-tier Ubuntu or whatever Linux instance. Doesn't matter. Maybe Fedora or Red Hat or whatever. I'm going to use Ubuntu instance, right? So it's a pre-tier instance, right? So this is just to initiate the commands to get the KOPS cluster created, right? That's why it's known as admin node. It's just a name we have tagged, right? Okay, then we need IAM role. Yeah, we need to give some privileges for this Kubernetes KOPS operations like, S3 bucket pool access, and we have set up other privileges as well, right? So let's take a look at those things. That's why we need the IAM role created, right? So let's take a look at more detail while doing the practical. So, and domain name and hoster zone. Yes, this is mainly for the API server in the cluster in the master node. Yeah, domain name we need. So that's why we are using Route 53 for that. And we can have it on public or private, but if you want to be public, you need to have your own domain. Right, but for this practical, you'll use a private one because not everybody is having domains, no, right? So I mean, we have to be feasible at every level. So I'm not going to use a public one. Otherwise, the resources who are going to follow this practical, they also have to get a public one. I mean, we have to pay and get it in order to do this practical. So therefore, I'm using for everybody to complete this practical, I'm using a private hoster zone and private domain. So therefore, anyone can do the practical, right? That's what. Okay. But in production, yes, we need the public one. So just a matter of changing. It's not a big deal. You'll be able to do it, right? Once you understand how to do it on private, you can just switch to public. So I'll explain it while doing the practical, no problem, right? So S3 bucket, yes, to store the configuration and state info. Yeah, actually, this is mainly for the cluster configuration information, because we know not the HCD, because we know HCD, right? We have learned it, right? We have gone through the cluster architecture as well. So HCD is mainly to maintain the, what is happening in the cluster as of now, right? The cluster state. Now, this is not the cluster state, but the configuration information. So that is stored in S3 bucket, right? Now, for example, if you want to delete the cluster, and we need to have those information and how to track those things, right? What are the available nodes and nodes. So those time, again, even if you create the cluster, when you create the cluster, the definitions of cluster creation, we need to store it in S3 bucket. So you will see those things when the practical is going on. So that is why we need the S3 bucket, right? And we need the permission, put permission for S3 bucket via the IAM role, right? Yeah, right. Okay, so this is, we just visited this site, the official site. All right, so let's go here as well, because Kubernetes officially supports KOPS, right? So that's what. This is their Kubernetes official site. So if you look at that, you will notice they are explaining it, right? KOPS. Installing Kubernetes with KOPS, see, they are officially supporting that, right? So this is a quick start shows how easily install Kubernetes cluster on AWS. It uses a tool called KOPS, right? So KOPS will, yeah, that is the GitHub, right? Kubernetes KOPS, we don't need to go there for the time being, right? And KOPS is an automated provisioning system, fully automated installation, uses DNS to identify clusters. Yeah, we will learn those things, the environment variable and DNS methods and the public and the private domains, or self-healing, everything runs, auto-scaling groups. I just mentioned those things. Multiple OS support, Debian, Ubuntu. Yeah, you can use either of them. And high available support, I explained those things, and can directly provision or generate Terraform manifest. See, yeah, that is also support, right? You can generate, but no need to go there, because it automates the infrastructure provisioning, the KOPS itself, right? So before you begin, you must have kubectl install. Yeah, we'll go to it. No need to worry about these steps now. So let's do the practical, then you'll be able to understand all these steps will be explained. So this is in the Kubernetes documentation also, they are going through these steps, right? Shortly, they are explaining that one, but we can come back to this one later once you do the practical, then you will understand that one. I will walk through to all the steps, and let's first get the KOPS cluster created, right? All right, so hope the theoretical explanation is clear, right? So let's get into the practical, right? And yeah, so the step one, as I mentioned, the very first instance, very first step is we need to have the which one, this admin instance up and running. We need to have the admin instance, right? So for that, we need to have create a pre-tier Ubuntu instance, and of course, I have asked you to create a security group separately. We can do these two steps together. I mean, no need to have a security group created once and assign it separately. While we creating the pre-tier instance, and we can assign these ports, right? Because these ports are required in order to connect to the cluster. So, but it's better to keep them open. 80, the command one and SSH port is anyway there. So the HTTPS as well, right? Because from this admin node, we can connect to the master node of the KOPS cluster, right? So let's check those things later. Yeah, so the very first thing is that, so we need to create a pre-tier instance, Ubuntu instance, and we can connect them using a mobile system, right? So I think I can start that one right away from the next session, right? So for the time being, I'm going to stop here. I'll see you soon with the practical for KOPS, right? Okay, have a great time, right? Bye-bye.